we should probably put in big, bold letters, may contain spiders, because I've seen a few of those, but that's not what I'm looking for. Not just spiders. Today I'm looking for spiders, flies, bugs, ants, anything small, and insects basically, because this is a little garden safari. Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching Adorama TV, brought to you by Adorama, the camera store that's got everything for us photographers. And today I'm in my garden looking for macro insects to photograph. And well, we've got this sort of wild area in the garden and it is full of little insects. The first tip I'm going to give you, I'm going to start off straight away with a tip, and that is not just to walk in and walk around, but to stop and wait and look. So I'm looking for movement. I'm looking for things that are moving. And if I find something, because you don't see them if you're just walking around, you have to stop and look. And then magically things will appear in front of you that you just don't see if you're walking fast through an area. So let's talk about the kit that I'm going to use. I'll talk about this in a minute, but let's begin with the absolute essentials. If you're just getting started in macro photography, you could get away with a standard kit lens and maybe a close-up filter or some extension tubes. But if you're serious about your macro, you need an actual macro lens. Now that's one that can do actual life-size reproduction, or 1:1. I'm using the Olympus 60mm macro. All camera manufacturers have their own macro lenses, and as long as it will do that life-size reproduction, you're going to be absolutely fine. And then there is the light. I like using flash, but let's start off with something a lot more simple and basic. Let's get rid of the flash and we'll go back just to standard daylight, because well, there's quite a lot of that around today. There's quite a few hoverflies on these buttercups, which look really good. But the trouble is, if I'm taking pictures with natural light in full sun, it's kind of like I would be doing a portrait. Full sun on people doesn't look great. Full sun on insects isn't always the best option either. I think the lighting is much nicer in the shade. The downside is I need to adjust my camera settings. I'm in aperture priority mode. I've set in f5.6, ISO 400, and the camera is setting the shutter speed. In the shade, that shutter speed can drop a little bit low, so I'll need to adjust my ISO to take that into account. But the bigger problem is, there's just no insects in this bit. They're all in the sun, so I need to go back over here to find them. So how do I get around that? Well, the solution is to grab one of these. A little 5-in-1 reflector, and this is the diffuser part of the 5-in-1 reflector. And with this, I can create my own shade anywhere I want it, just by putting this between the sun and my subject. So this allows me to actually create my own shade. All I have to do is find a little one, and all of a sudden they've all disappeared. Ah, here we go. Create my own shade. And now that looks so much better. I have softer lighting on my subject, but I can still see detail in there. My shutter speed has dropped a little bit, so I need to increase my ISO to compensate. But on balance, I think this is a much better way of working. Okay, here we go. This time, it's a bit of luck. I'm actually creating my own shadow with this, which is really useful. So here's my technique for getting close to these little creatures. I start actually by taking pictures from a fair distance away. Now that's really useful because you get to frame it up in the frame, but also you get some surroundings, something to identify where it was, and then slowly moving in closer and closer and closer. I'm using autofocus. Sometimes I'll use continuous autofocus. Sometimes it'll be just single point autofocus. But you'll notice I'm not using the viewfinder. I don't want to get my head down there and disturb these little guys with my breath. So I'm backed off quite a bit. That's fantastic. I'll also take bursts of pictures. So I'll do it in bursts of 3 or 5 images, because you're never quite sure which bits you've got in focus. Even a little puff of breeze or a little shake of the hands is enough to throw your focus point out. So sometimes the eyes are in focus, sometimes they're not. Multiple images will just help me to get more shots that I actually can use rather than failures. Is it still there or is it gone? Oh no, it's like everything, it's gone. Right, let's go find another one. This diffuser that I've got, it's about 60 centimeters in diameter. It's probably not the best one for this sort of work because it's a little bit floppy. I'll put links in the video description to better gear. And the reason I don't have better gear for this is because this isn't how I usually take my macro work. So let's switch around and get rid of this and get some flash on. So the flash I'm using is this. This is a Flashpoint Zoom lithium ion. It doesn't have an exciting name and it's not an exciting flash. It's the most basic manual flash that Flashpoint do. It's got a couple of really useful features for me though. It has a PC sync socket on the side, and with a PC sync cable I can connect it to the PC sync socket on my OM system OM1. This is a MagMod MagSphere and it attaches via magnets. And it's squishy, which makes it really useful. It just helps to diffuse the light, make it slightly bigger. It's not designed for this work whatsoever, but it actually works quite well. Underneath is a magic arm. That connects via a cold shoe that I've popped on one end to the camera, and the magic arm then can be loosened off, repositioned, and I like to position mine so that it is sort of pointing in from a bit of an angle, a few inches in front of the lens, because that is where my maximum focus or macro point occurs on this camera. My camera settings for flash are a little bit different. So I'm in manual mode first of all, I always am for flash, and then my flash sync speed, so that's 250th of a second for my OM1. Aperture of f8, which gives me a little bit more depth of field, and I can drop my ISO lower, ISO 200, which is the native ISO for my particular camera, therefore, in theory, the best quality. I'm really only photographing a few inches in front of my lens, and to get the flash right at that distance, I'm at 1/32nd power, occasionally 1/16th. There's a couple of advantages to flash over ambient light, and the first one is just the sheer quality that it gives. Everything is so much crisper, sharper, and more detailed. Obviously, you've got control of the light, which is really useful, and you get that partly because this flash does make a bit of a shadow, and we know that shadow light is my favorite light, but it's also the light I can add in my own effects into. But there are downsides, and perhaps the obvious one is it casts a shadow. So when you're going into a little bug and it sees a shadow fall across it, they will more often than not fly off. So that's kind of one of the sad things. Just the sheer inconvenience of it. It's big, it's bulky, it's cumbersome. And then there is the fact that the light I've set for around an inch or two in front of my lens. Anything further away is not going to get lit by the flash. And the further away things are, the darker they become. That's one of the downsides of flash. But the upsides, I think, outweigh that considerably. In my mind, there are three basic levels of macro photography. Level one is the sort of images that you would see in an encyclopedia, a textbook image of an insect looking down from above, because that's how we tend to see them. It's not the most interesting or exciting. So level two is to get down to their level. Being at their eye level definitely gives the picture more power. And you're seeing the world in a way that you don't normally, which is of course what this sort of photography is all about. Level three, much harder to do. Just like with my portraits, I'm looking to get eye contact. So that means trying to get down to their level and in line with them as well. And that is much harder, but when you nail it, it really looks good. So you might be wondering why f8, not f22, and there's a reason for that, and it's called diffraction. Now, diffraction is an optical effect where if you remove all other reasons for your pictures being blurred, they are still soft. And it's down to a combination of the lens, the sensor. It's way too complicated to go into this video, so my advice, work at f8, and if you need more depth of field, take multiple pictures that you can then stitch together in post-processing. I use Photoshop to join multiple images together. It's really good at automatically aligning the images and then blending them together. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you might be wondering, why is a studio portrait photographer talking about macro photography? Well, the answer to that is I have a hobby, and my hobby happens to be photography, specifically macro photography. I find it super relaxing to come out into the garden and just see this little alien world that's right here in front of me, because the closer you look, the more you see. Now, if you've enjoyed this video or you've got any questions, don't forget to leave me a comment down below, and of course click on the bell icon. And if you haven't already done so, why not click on the subscribe button? I'm Gavin Hoey. Thanks for watching.